Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Shambhavi. I'm a graduate student at Harvard University and online editor of the Africa Policy Journal. We at the Africa Policy Journal are extremely honored and pleased to welcome Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Welcome, Dr. Phumzile. We also welcome all of you here in person. This event is brought to you in collaboration with Center for African Studies, Center for Public Leadership at Harvard Kennedy School, and Africa Policy Journal. The Africa Policy Journal is a student-run online publication dedicated to promoting dialogue about African policy and current affairs in the realms of governance, law, education, business, health, design, and culture. The journal was initially started in 2006 by Harvard Kennedy School of Government, but has recently expanded to encompass all the schools of Harvard University. Before we begin, I request you to put your phones on silent. We'll have time for a moderated Q&A session with Dr. Phumzile. I would now request Mandla Isaacs, an MC-MPA candidate and an Edward Mason Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School, to introduce Dr. Phumzile to all of us. Mandla.
It is my honor today to, as we would say in South Africa, introduce, I can say with no fear of contradiction, one of our finest leaders in the democratic period. It's a particular honor for three reasons. One, less noble, two, more noble. The less noble is that I've enjoyed this week getting messages saying, "How do you say her name?" So, having had my name mangled for 8 months, I've enjoyed teaching everyone about Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka and how to say her name. So it's been quite fun. The second, more noble reason is that, Mam Phumzile is one of the, first of all, she's a founding mother of our country. We're really only 30 years old in democratic terms, and having served from the beginning of our first democratic parliament in 1994, she helped develop the new constitution that was introduced in 1996, and just really helped establish our democracy. So she's truly one of the founding mothers of our country. She's served with distinction across various roles in South Africa, from a activist and teacher and a development practitioner, and then of course as a politician, as a member of parliament, a minister in various portfolios, and a deputy president in the Thabo Mbeki administration, where she was entrusted with the responsibility to lead the Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative in the 2000s. So really just groundbreaking work on inclusive development in our country. And then of course, moving on to the UN, where she served from 2013 to 2021 as the Undersecretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, as a global advocate for women and girls. And the final reason why this is an honor is, you may not remember, but in 2008 perhaps, there was a sort of youth politics gathering in Sandton, and you were there, and I gave probably my first ever political speech. And just giving that speech in your presence really, for me, kind of set me on the journey of leadership and feeling like this is something I can do. So just your presence and on that day actually meant a lot in my own life trajectory. So it's an honor to introduce you, Mom.
Thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, I'm going to now bring in Ada Ezokoli, a fellow Mason Fellow here at the Harvard Kennedy School and the editor of the Africa Policy Journal, who is going to moderate today's session.
Thanks.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Manda, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here today. It's really an honor to have this conversation with you. Before we start, I know it's been a really long week for you.
Yeah.
And you've had so many events. I wanted to just ask you a little bit, to talk a little bit about the projects that you're working on for the Hauser Fellow, and just what your week has been like. What are some of the highlights, if you can?
Well, it's been a busy week, and talking to many people. Can you hear me?
Thank
Thank you.
It's on.
Yeah. It's been a busy week, talking to many people, students and faculty. And it's been good to get an insight of where the students are, their anxieties, both about their academic work and about jobs. I can just feel that they're really anxious about what they're going to do when they leave here. Interesting to talk to faculty about how they are adjusting their courses in line with this new world that we all find ourselves in. Having been out of the classroom for a long time, it's been good to know how the other side is thinking about these things.
Excellent, thank you. So today's conversation is going to talk a little bit about women and girls and the things, the concerns around them, and also how we engage men in these conversations. I always like starting conversations like this by learning a little bit about what got you on this journey. What is it that led you to the work that you ended up doing, both in politics and then in policy? If you can think back, and why were you inspired to do the work that you're doing today?
Honestly, there wasn't a path for me in politics that was visible. There was always going to be a path for me to work with women, always going to be a path for me to work with youth, wherever I find myself. And my chosen path was in education and in teaching. I enjoyed teaching a lot. But I didn't do it for as much as I wanted to because of apartheid. At the time when I was teaching, it was at the time when the situation was quite intense. And because I was working with students, and students were my comrades as well, and I saw my responsibility, including making students aware of what we were facing and the need for us to be responsible for changing their education as well as the country. But of course, that soon made it difficult for me to remain within the school that I was in, and I was taken out of education. My principal and other concerned people fearing that I might get arrested because the system just didn't like people who thought like me to be exposed to so many children every day. And that's what brought me closer to working with women, because from there I jumped into a women's organization, and it just kept on happening, until I was also in full-time politics.
Fascinating. Your story is really inspiring for people like me who have looked at, again, my path is also, more like advocacy and advocating for people, and politics is not something that I thought that I would ever get involved in. But just being here for the year at the Kennedy School, I've seen that you have to get involved at some point in the way that your country is governed.
Yeah.
So
it's most irresponsible for a young person not to be a part of something that is bigger than them. It's wasted youth. Yeah.
Thank you. So, prior to COVID in 2020, there was the Beijing Platform for Action was marking 25th anniversary in 2020, and there was this momentum that this was going to be a huge thing, for gender equality, and then COVID happened. I wanted you to reflect a little bit on what were some of the progress that the Beijing Platform for Action had before the pandemic, and then maybe talk a little bit of how COVID-19, the pandemic itself, affected women and girls in your perspective.
Yeah. The marking of Beijing 25 was certainly a huge moment for us, but we particularly wanted to highlight the fact that progress has been slow and uneven. and to encourage more outreach, actually, because we were settling into imagining progress that is exaggerated. It's only when you look at figures that you realize how much we have just been moving slowly. But after having tried to get member states in particular to help to mark Beijing 20 and not managing to sustain their engagement, I was very anxious that at least at the UN we do something that we can sustain. Challenges that we faced as women, the women's agenda was broke. So we needed money to advance the work that we do on women. And the people who were participating were limited. Really, it was mostly member states and civil society, and to some extent, private sector. We didn't have a dynamic youth engagement. We didn't have enough men and boys. We didn't have enough philanthropic organizations and so on. So we structured the marking of Beijing 25 to bring those in a systematic and sustainable way. And we said we will mark Beijing 25 up to 2025, and then we'll reflect in 2025 how much we have come, and then see how we got forward. So we formed Generation Equality. Maybe some of you have heard about Generation Equality, where we brought all of these stakeholders together, and they had to pay to participate because we needed money. If you are a member state, you had to pay relative to your GDP to be part of Generation Equality. And I didn't have a right to ask member states to do so. And there were many member states who were not happy to participate in Generation Equality, but we had enough who wanted to. So I felt I'll take it. We brought in these interested member states. Well, we were able to get 40 billion US dollar pledge, a figure we'd never seen in UN Women. We were able to co-create a long-term program with young people. We had philanthropic organization who brought in resources that we'd never seen in UN Women, and changed and committed through their programs what they were going to do. So that's where we are now. I have not been at UN Women, obviously. I don't know. I'm hoping that they are keeping these organizations in check, because I would feel very betrayed if that didn't happen, because we really worked very hard to come to this point. We also recognized that COVID has taken us back. So whatever we were doing was not just about moving forward, but it was about making up what we already had lost, because COVID had disproportionately affected women. And the big takeaway here is that every pandemic is not gender neutral. There is a particular impact on women, and the impact does not come just from the pandemic. It comes from the way we manage the pandemic. Women had a higher challenge because the lockdown women with their abusers. Maybe we couldn't help that because that's one way of keeping people alive, but that's what we got. Women lost their jobs. But when we came with financial stimulus, they were not disproportionately favoring women who were disproportionately affected. So women were left behind. Women had disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care work at home. But we did not have adequate relief measures, even in the financial stimulus that were brought out to support women. So there always has to be someone who's thinking about how is this thing going to affect women. And of course, the majority of the committees in different countries that were looking at COVID did not include women. I think I spent probably 6 months going from country to country, knocking and banging government's door and saying, you cannot have all these men to solve gender-based violence that is happening in your country, to check unpaid care, to look at the job losses, which were mostly women's jobs that were lost. You need women to be inputting on what needs to be done. So it's the way we handle the situation.
Thank you for that. I want you to reflect on looking at the challenge that COVID-19 caused. What were the differences, if any, that you saw between the impact on women in developed versus developing countries?
In developing countries, they obviously were better resourced. I mean, if you just think about vaccine apartheid, as they call it, women in developed countries were able to address their need to be vaccinated, and in many developing countries, governments also, when it comes to job, which is something that really matters, did not have a plan B, for the women who lost jobs disproportionately, did not have the financial resources to stimulate alternatives so that women can find jobs. Even though the financial stimulus did not favor women, it was better in richer countries that even though it was not where it should have been, but it was much better than what was available for women in developing countries. So there was less of everything for women in developing countries.
Thank you. You said it in your last response. You said that you had to go country to country banging on government doors to say that women should be included in decision making. And so we're talking about recovery now when it comes to COVID-19. And talking about that national responses need to include women and girls and place them, as part of their response, represent their rights, so that they can get better economic outcomes and quality. One of the challenges, or one of the recommendations rather, proposed include ensuring women's equal representation on all response planning and decision making. When it comes to developing countries, especially countries in Africa, there's always there's a concern that there are not enough resources to implement these recommendations.
Representation?
Yes. To ensure that women are represented, that they are given the proper, not just a seat at the table, but actually resources to make sure that they are provided for equally, or that they are equal. What would you say is the role of multilateral institutions, or the role of governments as well, to ensure that these recommendations are implemented, and to support countries that are maybe struggling with implementing them?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the underrepresentation of women is not costlier. It's not more expensive to have a representative who's a woman than is a man. So just the starting point is that your starting premise is wrong.
Right.
It's the attitude towards women that is sustained, that we see everywhere, that makes women to be underrepresented. But let me just digress a bit just about our challenges in Africa and COVID, the kinds of things that women faced. Girls in Africa who were out of schools when schools were closed had a difficult challenge in many countries. In many countries, when schools reopened, many girls did not go back to school. Right. So we reduced the number of girls who have access to education, which is because we want them to be here. If we lose them already at primary school, game over.
Right.
Girls were forced to marry older people at the time when we were busy fighting to end child marriage. In that desperate situation of COVID, parents would do anything to get what they thought they could salvage when they marry their child. Girls were trafficked during that time, and the possibility to follow what has happened to the girls were much higher in the space of COVID. We saw a little bit of reduction of female genital mutilation, but we're seeing it increasing and coming back again. And of course, women who did not, or rather women who worked in situations where there was a lot of unemployment of women, particular tourism and hospitality. In most cases, they were not in protected jobs. And they were at the bottom of the pyramid. They lost both immediate income, but they lost the overall possibility to have the possibility to work. So that left a lot of women in a situation that needed a comprehensive look in order to enable them to recover and to be taken back to home. At this point, we're still struggling with that. If we talk about building back better is obviously building greener, because we are also coming out of very climate unfriendly industries. It means building back better in a gender responsive manner so that you can get more work, because we don't want to emerge as we are emerging now, and it really worries me, with business as usual. We cannot go back to the status quo, because the status quo was never right. COVID was giving us some opportunity. That was the silver line in the cloud, to restart to save ourselves and to be on a much better trajectory. But I don't know what your take is. Do you think that you are emerging better, taking a more constructive route? I don't know. It's not satisfactory.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the correction. So I want to talk a little bit about, or rather, actually staying with your last point. Are there any successes you see? Are there any examples that you see where countries are trying to change the narrative to say, okay, this is an opportunity that we have now to do different, to do better? Here's steps, that we can do. Is there any?
Yeah, I mean, when we say it is unequal, certainly there are those that worry you, and there are those that are making the right steps. If you just think about Africa in general, it is not the worst continent when it comes to representation of women. Actually, now the West Africans are going to kill me. East and Southern Africa has done much better on representation of women. We have had lesser coups in that region, because there's a correlation between gender equality, participation of women, and development of people. And the absence of upheavals in that region, except maybe in Zimbabwe to some extent, has made it possible for some progress, including acceptance of the role of women. So you have Zimbabwe, you have South Africa, Rwanda, who has done very, very, very well. In East Africa, you have Kenya, who's also done very well. So that is something that if you compare us with the rest of the world, is much better. But women are also very poor in those countries, so that must also not fool us. So yes, on representation, there has been a general move towards the right direction, but not enough, not fast enough. We need to move there. There's also been an increase in labor absorption. It's just that the jobs are not quality jobs, are not protected. Women in Africa still work predominantly in the informal sector. And working in the informal sector does mean that you are almost just above the poverty line. And the possibility to lose those jobs is always very high. But the the informal sector has been able to sustain itself over a longer period of time. About 73% of women who work in Africa work in the informal sector. So it is quite important for us to take the private sector seriously. In fact, one of the experts who's here in Harvard, at Wiego, who works within the informal sectors in the world, if you should talk to her sometime, because she really has a really good insight on what is happening in the different countries. And some countries have worked very hard to retain some of the support that they give to private sector. Large number of women in Africa work in agriculture. A number of countries have passed many good laws that protect women in agriculture and have enabled women to own the land they till. We also have seen an increase of the number of laws that address violence against women. But it's not enough. It's so not enough. It's not funny. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to open up for questions in a bit. So if you have questions, please note them, and so that we can take a few before we have to let you go. I know that one of the things that you're really passionate about is making sure that men are included in this conversation, engaging men and boys. And like you said, there's progress happening, but it's not enough. So I wanted to understand, I mean, men play important roles in our communities, and men and boys influence how other men and boys think. So there are men who are speaking out. So do you see more men speaking up for women? Do you see it happening? Do you see progress in that area in terms of engaging men, especially when it comes to issues around gender-based violence?
Yes, there is a definite increase of men who speak on gender equality, men who take a stand on gender-based violence. Not enough. Guys, you're sleeping on the job. Really, it's just not enough. We have focused on men with authority and power to begin with, because they have the possibility to remove the barriers that women have to work for years trying to remove. A man can just sign and it's done. We have also worked with ordinary men in society, because you need to spread the actions and to make sure that you have more men who are not bystanders. We've also worked with boys and children, because children start to be prejudiced around the age of 6. So it's important to actually stop them from becoming prejudiced and engaging them together with boys and girls. I am very concerned when I get into an event and I just see women. I just see this is a problem. It is important to continuously involve and engage men, because this is their mess. We are doing men a favor as gender activists and feminists, sorting their mess. And if they are continuously not there when we are helping them to clean the mess they've created and continue to create, we are actually not giving them an opportunity to come right. So one of the most important things is the engagement of men in the issue of gender equality. And for men to know that their engagement will not lead them to get medals. You will not praise fishes for swimming. You do what you have to do because it's your responsibility to salvage humanity. It's a collective responsibility. It is not a responsibility of women. Women do it because they stand to die if they don't do it. So because they want to survive, they do it. But it is absolutely not the responsibility of women. So I am hoping that in my lifetime, I will see a feminist men's movement that truly leads gender equality. That we will know that we are turning the corner.
Thank you so much for that very passionate response.
I hope you are getting the hint, guys.
Many of us here are in school, either at the Kennedy School or other schools, are interested in issues, policy issues. Could you share what is it that you say to students who are in school, in policy, who want to pursue careers in policy, who want to pursue social change issues, about thinking about gender equality? Because sometimes, you might be doing whatever, you might not be in a field that you are actually working on gender equality, so it may not be at the back of your mind. But how do we make sure that in the work that we do, we have that lens and we continue to focus on it?
Yeah, both yourselves and your teachers really need to think about how gender equality is integrated in your studies. Because there is no policy that you make that will not impact on women.
Right.
And policies will impact on men and women differently. So you actually have to confront that. Otherwise, if you come with gender neutral policies, that is discriminatory. It needs to come from the teaching so that as a student you are stimulated when you teach. But I'm hoping that when you come to class and you don't see that, you will be able to raise it so that as a class you actually address that. You also, I think, at an individual level, need to make that decision that as a policy maker, I'm making policy for all the people. It is bad corporate governance to be a sexist policy makers because you go into a position with the resources of the state already predetermining that you are going to discriminate other citizens just because of their gender. And of course, women and men are very diverse. There are men and women who are non-binary. You also have to consider and be concerned about that. So you really have to be a stickler for that, constantly raising, also for the benefit of your classmates, so that you can all be concerned and continuously address these issues of the impact of policy on gender. I took a decision long time ago that whatever policy I have to deal with or program, if it works for women, it will work for everybody. Because you have a lot of policies that can be hailed for being most dramatic, and when you look at what it has done in a cohort of people, it just did not reach women. If it has reached women, it certainly has reached men. Absolutely. So try and focus on women. If you focus on women, but good deal, you touch everybody.
I think that's the slogan I'm taking away from that. If it works for women, it works for everyone. Thank you so much for that. I think we are about ready to open for questions. If you have a question, just while you're reflecting on that, I know that the digital divide is also an issue that you really care about. So can you talk a little bit about what your priorities are when you are advocating for more women to have to be included in digital representation, so women to have access to the internet, women to be involved in digital jobs. What is your core issue, your core interest?
My core interest is just digital literacy to begin with. This is sort of my flaw. Because already now, if you are not digital literate, you are just illiterate. Because there's absolutely nothing you are going to be able to do without digital literacy. So digital literacy is a basic that you need to do. But of course, the tech space is very masculine. It discriminates against women. So further than that, you have to fight for the representation and the participation of women as programmers, as software developers, as content developers, etc., so that women can actually influence what the industry does. It's much more frightening in the fourth industrial revolution, actually, because you do have garbage in, garbage out. What you put in into the machines will throw out the kind of prejudice that you are bringing in. So if you don't have women participating in order for them to intervene on behalf of women, we're going to turn robots into sexists. In fact, it's already happening. So we have to really think about how do we make all of the machines that are going to be servicing and working with us to be undiscriminatory. And that takes thinking.
Thank you, certainly does. So we're going to open up for questions. If you have a question, just indicate and we can come to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here with us today. My name is Zina. I'm originally from the Cape Flats. I'm still living there. I'm a doctoral student at the School of Public Health. My work is predominantly with health workers, community health workers who are predominantly women. South Africa has 100,000. And I run a non-profit that we originally started working with community health workers. And then, honestly, I just realized I don't know how to support this because the things they were saying to me was that we need uniforms, we need food, etc., and they're paid. But to your point around meaningful work, they do such important work. So what effectively we've done is we've created a parallel structure where we train our team really well, we pay them double. And then we train family caregivers to try to solve the same problem. But my question is, given that this is a parallel effort, I think a lot about this should be in government. And I know that it's in some ways a luxury that we have the community health worker system because many countries don't have it. But I am sitting with this question on how to more effectively work together with government so that it isn't something that is run in parallel in Black and coloured communities. So I'd love if you have any insights on that.
Yeah. Well, for every program that you want to scale up, it's important to have government because it is the responsibility of government anyway to provide. I think civil society and other actors can assist government, for instance, in piloting so that by the time government takes over something, they already have figured out many of the potential detractors. But ultimately, you have to take it to government for scaling up. Now I know it's easier said than done because I don't know about your government. My government sometimes is government. So you cannot always get the things that, yes, I know, that's what I'm saying, our government. So a combination of your continuous activism, which enables you to pressure government, is important, but your commitment to the cause is important. So you continue doing what you do until such time you hit the sweet spot. I mean, I feel the same frustration about working in digital literacy, that I don't think that it is the responsibility of an NGO, smaller nyana like mine, to be trying to train the teachers of South Africa to be digital literate, because it is such a problem. But I know that government has challenges, it's difficult. It's both challenges sometimes, and maybe it's just not yet the priority that we see it to be. So you have to constantly do the right thing, show them the results, and hopefully one day the penny will drop.
So I think can we go here?
Hi, I'm Sherilyn. I'm an LLM student at the law school, and I'm also South African. And my background is I'm a strategic impact litigator back home. And I've done a lot of work around technology and access to the internet and harms online. So my question around digital literacy is, I found this tension when engaging with political leaders on the continent of making them understand the harms of digital, of no access to digital rights, but also increasing digital literacy and access to the internet. And it feels like we're talking two different languages, mainly because there's an age gap, but also a gender gap. There's not enough women in the room. So how would you suggest we address that to get leaders to actually listen to us, to help us find solutions on how we can get more Africans digital literate, how we can find more effective and impactful solutions on gaining access to the internet, and also increasing investment on the continent around digital literacy and access to the internet?
I don't know. But I mean, it's just one of those things you have to keep on doing over and over again to make the leaders aware of the opportunity cost of not having our people digitally literate. I think it is very important to constantly have build case studies that demonstrate what is there to lose, and bring those case studies to leaders when you meet them. Present those case studies and show them what you are missing. Build allies with a handful of people that you can get that think like you, so that in some rooms you identify who is the shaker and mover in that place that can be listened to, and make sure that you ask them to actually go and do your bidding, because they are likely to, at the very least, get a hearing in the first place. So yeah, it's a matter of multiple and constant fighting that you have to do. I'm sorry there isn't an easier way.
Okay, we are actually like 5 minutes away. I know you've been. So can you quickly ask your question, and then I'll come to her, because we know that you have someone you need to be.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Simani. I'm also from South Africa. I'm thinking about
Wow,
economics.
this is a South African room.
Very South African.
The next person has to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously your story is so inspirational to me as like a woman in South Africa looking to be in leadership. And I was wondering, what are some experiences or challenges that you faced being a woman in South African politics and also a woman in ANC leadership? And how did you kind of circumvent some of those challenges?
Okay, let's ask both questions so that to save time.
Just come here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm not from South Africa. I'm from
Good.
And following on, I think the question, when I think about gender issues, what really comes to mind is why is it so difficult when the first love for men is their mothers? If everyone thought about, I'm making this policy so that my mother, my daughter, my sister could benefit, I think then it would be very easy for everyone. But going back to, again, the opportunities that women have had in Africa, because I know in East Africa and South Africa, like you've said, women have had the opportunity of being at the table. And they have been part of this policy and decision-making process. So I struggle with why a country like mine, Uganda, where we also had I think almost, she might have been the first vice president in Africa. And we had also a speaker of parliament who was a lady. Why do these issues of gender continue to be a challenge with such women at the table? And I'm talking about those women, but there are other women also in senior positions who are close to the table and can influence these policies.
And then let's take yours. And then
I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about the experience of fundraising for Africa. As you said, the $40 billion amount is huge, and in the developed world, especially the United States, there's a huge home bias where people feel more comfortable donating and investing at home. So I was just curious what objections you got and how you were still able to raise.
okay.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to forget.
Maybe I ask the last question. My name is Jeff from Kenya. Before I came, I'm an LLM student at the law school. Before I came to law school, I was working in the Directorate of Legal Services in Parliament. And when we were doing the public participation across the country, I had some concern that despite us, having these women with representation at the top, the women at the bottom, the women, the rural areas, they are still suffering. I don't know what measures or mechanisms we can put in place to ensure that, even the women we are empowering, they don't use the majority as, the political base, you just use them, representing women to ascend to power, because surely you can see that there's a big number of women that actually has been neglected, despite us, seeing some faces at the top.
Okay. Yeah, starting with the challenges that I face, I'm almost embarrassed to say, at the time when I was in leadership of the ANC in South Africa, was the best time to be a woman leader. Because one, we had the male leadership that had a good grasp of gender equality. Nelson Mandela and the whole Rivonia generation. And even these young ones who were sexist were afraid to show their true colors, because the dominant theory in the organization was that of accommodating and respecting women and gender. The fact that in our constitution, we say it is a non-sexist and a non-racist, South Africa is a non-racist and non-sexist, sealed it for women. So it has not been that easy. Secondly, when I have power, I use it. And that is very important for everybody. When we have authority invested in you, use it. So don't give any man an opportunity to move you around, to think that they can in any way steal your power and your thunder from you. So I was super conscious about making sure that I just don't give anyone, I don't give that oxygen. So a combination of circumstances and my determination, I guess I was already gender conscious when I was in position. So I was looking for those opportunities. And when I see it, I slice it. And that sort of, I think everyone got the memo. And it made life relatively easier. But I also know that I had lots of times, especially when I was in the when I was Minister of Mines and Energy. The mining sector is very masculine. So I would go with my Director General, who is a man, and people will just go to the Director General to give him the best courtesy because they think he must be the minister and I must be accompanying him. Poor man. I was always laughing at him, having to just say, please, this is the person. So you have those things, but on a serious level, I just did not tolerate it. And it's important for women to do that, because when you have the power, you can actually do that, not allow that to even be an issue. But I also want to say to you who are here, whichever country you come from, you guys have to go to politics. You cannot leave the political arena to the worst possible people, because the more you move out of politics is the more you are opening up the space for your countries to be run by people you don't even want to follow. So you are just as guilty for having our countries run down if you don't avail yourself to run for politics. If you don't remember anything that I said today, remember that this job is for you. We cannot anymore have politicians who just shout slogans, and because of the slogans and the loudest voice, they then have the loudest possibility to lead us. It just cannot be like this. We want thinkers, we want people who care about people. Not everybody has to be educated, but everybody has to care about the people they are leading. So this is the homework I would like to leave you with. And really, you answered yourself. I think yours was more of a comment, really. And I also sort of agree with you. When a woman leads without a constituency, when you almost have your handbag as your constituency, you have lost the plot. I think it's important to choose and believe in leaders that bring people with them and report back, and there's an interaction with them. There's an organization in Africa now that we have started, African Women Leaders Network, AWLN. Some of you might have come across it. It's one of the things that we constantly are talking about. This cannot be an organization of women who lead themselves, where you are your own constituency and any other person is there to push you. But when you have to deliver, you deliver to yourself. So it's the thing that people like you have to constantly raise to women leaders, because there is a risk of slipping into that space where you lead no one, but you are a leader. On the fundraising, honesty is probably the best thing to impress the people we want on our side and to invest on our causes on the continent. And we also have to deal with the bias that people have, where their countries come first and they can't be bothered with the details of looking after someone who's far away and that kind of thing. And it's going to be a constant engagement with them. When I was fundraising, because I was fundraising with government, it just helped to cushion the biases, because, of working within the United Nations and shielding behind the United Nations. But in any other space, you constantly have to prove your credibility in front of the donors, and unfortunately, in front of biased donors, by the way.
Thank you so much
Thanks.
for your responses. It's been such a refreshing conversation, and we know that you have to get somewhere else. So I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you to the Center for African Studies for partnering with us for this amazing conversation.
Thanks.
We do have a small gift for you.
Okay.